Hi, Right Riders, Cruz here. Thank you so much for joining me. In this video, we are going to be analyzing mood in a short story. I am returning back to some literary analysis based on some feedback from fellow subscribers and students. So, this particular piece is a very short piece called Little Things by Raymond Carver. Raymond Carver is one of my favorite short story writers from the United States. And we're going to be looking at this little paragraph that we see here in which he begins his short story. Later, Right Writers, we will be writing a paragraph analyzing the mood of this particular paragraph. And we will also look at the entire short story so you can see how short this piece really is. Let's begin by reading this paragraph, and then we will begin writing and analyzing about the mood of this particular paragraph. Early that day, the weather turned and the snow was melting into dirty water. Streaks of it ran down from the little shoulder high window that faced the backyard. Cars slushed by on the street outside where it was getting dark, but it was getting dark on the inside too. All right, now, Right Writers, I went ahead and moved that paragraph into a Google Doc. So we will take a look at how we will analyze mood for this particular paragraph, but then also create our own analysis paragraph. In the first sentence, the first thing you want to offer is your personal opinion. You want to offer in your second sentence or sentence number two, your source, which is where you are retrieving your information. You want to then give the text evidence or the evidence from what you are reading to prove your opinion. And then in sentence number four, you want to elaborate on your opinion. And that gives us a starting point in which to build and create a paragraph. You begin with a personal opinion, followed by your source, then leading into the text evidence, and then you will elaborate on your initial opinion. So, looking at mood, the first thing I want to do is really think about the definition of mood. Oftentimes, students confuse tone with mood. Mood is when an overall feeling or atmosphere of a text is created, and it's created for the audience. And so the focus for mood is on the audience, whereas tone is the attitude of the writer. And tone is expressed again focused on the writer and the writer's attitude. Mood is how we are feeling as the audience as we're reading the text. Now, looking back at the text, let's go ahead and look at it again, and then we'll sort of pause and notice when the writer is offering mood for the audience. Early that day, the weather turned and the snow was melting into dirty water. All right, pausing for a minute, the one thing that I notice is this idea of the weather turning. For me, there's something about that that expresses mood. And so I definitely want to highlight that section right there because the weather is turning. And then this idea of the snow melting into dirty water. So snow was melting into dirty water. For me, that part is starting to hint at some sort of mood, and then I will continue reading. Streaks of it ran down from the little shoulder high window that faced the backyard. Now, for me, this particular sentence does not really um, highlight any mood for me, but perhaps it might for you. Perhaps the idea of streaks running down demonstrates mood. Maybe it does for you. And so you may choose to highlight that. For me, this sentence does, nothing for me. Now I'm moving on. I mean, in terms of looking for mood. Now I'm moving on to the next sentence. Cars slushed by on the street outside where it was getting dark. Okay, for me, this idea of it was getting dark is leading towards some sort of mood. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. And then we get to the last sentence, but it was getting dark on the inside too. And so for me, This is definitely leaning towards, mood, but this is also leaning towards tone. And so here is where, students struggle of, again, what's the difference between tone and mood? Well, in this case, the reader or the writer, Raymond Carver, or the narrator really, is very matter of fact in his tone in this section right here. From here to here, he sort of has this, you know, I'm just explaining to you what the weather is doing with no particular emotion attached to it. However, when we get to the last sentence, that's where something shifts. And so you could argue, let me make that a little bit of a different color here, but it was getting dark on the inside too, because here is where the tone begins to express itself, meaning the writer or the narrator is revealing tone. It's also revealing mood because we have, but it was getting dark on the inside too. And so I'm going to highlight that section also in aqua. And I just wanted to let you know that this is where we hear tone. And then the aqua is really also revealing mood. And perhaps students, you're understanding why, if you struggle with mood and tone, why that is. You're, again, mood is focused on the audience, tone is focused on the narrator's voice and how they sound when they are expressing or sharing the information. Let's go ahead now, but we're looking at mood. And so if we had to look at mood for this paragraph, we want to start with an opinion first. So I want to take this sentence out because, again, that is leading towards the tone, and I want to focus on mood. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my keyboard here, Alt Shift 5, and if you hit Alt Shift 5, it sort of crosses it out on in Google Docs. So, looking at an opinion, now just looking at the highlighted section, let's look at what I have highlighted. I've got the weather turned, snow was melting into dirty water, and it was getting dark. And so for me, that expresses mood. The question is, what kind of mood are we turning into here? So if the weather's turning and snow is melting into dirty water, streaks of it ran down from the little shoulder high window that faced the backyard. Cars slushed by on the street outside where it was getting dark. So, what is happening here? What can we infer? What can we conclude based on the information? Well, we can infer or conclude that it's raining. And because the snow is now melting and we're hearing slushing going on outside, it has to be raining outside. And so the rain is contributing perhaps to the mood. And so we can then create an opinion based on that information. And that's what I'm now going to do in sentence number 1. So we can go here and again, I don't want to insert myself. So I don't want to say something like, I can infer or conclude that it's raining outside, but I can say something like this, something like that. Now, right, writers, I did this on purpose um, for a reason, and that is this is a poorly written sentence. It's poorly written because it is using passive voice and it's including extra information that I do not need and that I can use later in the paragraph. So we want to be as active as possible. And so rather than saying the mood created by the writer through the rain seems gloomy and miserable, let's say this. Notice how that is more direct and not passive. It's written in active voice because we have the rain creating that mood. My sentence number 2 is going to involve using the source. So by the source, it's telling the reader where we retrieved our information. Well, our information is coming from Little Things by Raymond Carver. And so we also know it's a short story. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that in sentence number 2. So a bit boring, but also important in terms of analysis. In the short story, and I want to make sure that I reference it properly, in the short story Little Things by Raymond Carver. And now to lead us into sentence number 3, I'm going to provide text evidence. So in the short story Little Things by Raymond Carver, it states, so we can say it states because we're talking about the story. If you want to say the narrator states, that's fine. But I like to do it states so I know I'm referring back to the story. So, sentence number 3 is evidence from the story, but I remind students that oftentimes sentence 2 and 3 are connected because now I want to use evidence from the story to prove that a gloomy and miserable mood is being created and by the rain. For our analysis paragraph, we have the rain creates a gloomy and miserable mood. In the short story Little Things by Raymond Carver, it states, the weather turned. Snow was melting into dirty water. Streaks of it ran down. Cars slushed by. It was getting dark. And so now we want to elaborate on our opinion based on what we have. And again, we're focused on mood, which is again, it's focusing on the audience and it's also the overall feeling or atmosphere of a text. This is the struggle area for most students, is sentence number 4. And part of that is because the student, meaning you, meaning I, we have to come up with our own ideas on how we're going to elaborate on this idea of creating a gloomy and miserable mood without repeating the text evidence. So you can't just say, well, because the snow was melting into dirty water. That's why the rain is creating a gloomy and miserable mood. The problem with that is you're just repeating what you already said. And so this is why, for many students, here is the struggle area, the challenge area, the part where you have to think. And in order to think, you've got to come up with some ideas. Those ideas turn into words. Those words turn into sentences. And so this is the part where again you need time to concentrate and to have that, quiet moment to come up with some ideas. So this idea of negative words is an idea that comes to mind as far as negative word choice, rather than calling the rain, you know, and again, we're inferring that it's raining, but rather than the rain clearing or cleaning the streets, you've got things becoming dirty and almost as if something is like gray. It's again this idea of negative word choice for me because rain can also cleanse, water can clean something, but in this case, the focus is on the negative qualities of the rain, of, the rain melting the snow into dirty water. So that's why I bring up this idea of negative word choice. Other ideas that come to mind is, this idea of imagery. Imagery is being used, again, creating images in your mind of that it's probably, if it's snowing, it's probably cold outside, it's raining, it's probably gray. So, this idea of cold and gray and messy, that is just some ideas that are coming to mind with this idea of images that are being created. Notice how that's happening in my mind, meaning the audience. And so you have to come up with these ideas on your own. And that's pretty much all I have for this. Um, Other than, the cars slushing by outside, it may be, traffic time. And so it may be the time where we're moving into dusk. So the cars slushing by outside may, again, we can infer that maybe there's traffic and um, it's turning, the day is going from day to dusk. And so we know when it's snowing and the days get shorter. Um, and we can sort of have those ideas from the cars. And so now I can use all this information, right, writers, to then start coming up with sentences on elaborating on this rain creating a gloomy and miserable mood. Okay, right, writers, now that my thinking is on paper, when I say sentence four, elaborate, that may mean sentence four, sentence five, sentence six, sentence seven. It really depends on where your thoughts go and where they take you. And you just have to, go along for the ride. But here's what I have, right, writers. When rain falls on snow, it can make the surroundings messy. In addition, when the time changes from day to dusk, the sky becomes gray, especially during the winter. Therefore, this change in the weather from snow to rain develops a gloomy and miserable mood. And so, right, writers, one of the things that I tell my students is that you always want to end where you begin or where you began. And so, oftentimes, the same thing that you wrote in your first sentence should reappear in your last sentence. And that really helps to create sort of, what I call a full circle paragraph. You just want to change it a little bit. And so now, as we start to bring all of this information together, we can begin to see a paragraph, and specifically an analysis paragraph focused on mood. All right, let's take a look at the paragraph here. The rain creates a gloomy and miserable mood. In the short story Little Things by Raymond Carver, it states the weather turned. Snow was melting into dirty water. Streaks of it ran down. Cars slushed by. It was getting dark. When rain falls on snow, it can make the surroundings messy. In addition, when the time changes from day to dusk, the sky becomes gray, especially during the winter. Therefore, this change in the weather from snow to rain develops a gloomy and miserable mood. And so, right, writers, I leave you with this paragraph, analysis paragraph on mood. If I were to come back to this paragraph an hour later, I would probably make more changes to it and edits. If I were to come back to it tomorrow, I would make more edits and changes to it. Why? Because writers are never satisfied with what they have created, which is why writing is such a struggle. And, if you want to become a writer, that in and of itself is, be prepared to suffer. And that's part of the human experience, especially if you're a writer. Now we're going to take a look at the story itself. So, again, you can see how short the story is. And I hope that, again, this process helps you to understand how to create analysis paragraphs in a way that helps your writing become more organized and more focused and more to the point. Okay, right, writers. So here is the short story itself. This is it. This is the story where you see the brackets is where we analyzed that particular paragraph. And this was the story that I used, Little Things by Raymond Carver. And so, right, writers, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned not only some information on how to analyze a paragraph or analyze a section and focus on mood for writing, but also perhaps I exposed you to a new writer, Raymond Carver. Thank you so much, Right Writers. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you again next Tuesday. All right. Love you guys. Cruise out. Bye bye.